Hi all, this is Kirti here, and if you don't know me already, then I have 16 years of experience, total work ex across various facets of development life cycle, right from being an admin to working in the administrative team, and then moving on to the technical roles of being in a technical team, then designer, developer, and whatnot. And currently, of course, Scrum Master for a very long time, and now I'm currently working as a technical manager as well. So, yeah, that's about me. And thank you, Sunand, for again giving me an opportunity where actually I have a platform to express my views. And please do let us know if there's anything else you would like us to do a session on. So, moving on, thank you very much. Moving on to the first question. So I'll be very clear. I am not attended myself the Salesforce interview, but these questions are from one of our community members who attempted the Salesforce Scrum Master interview, and they got some a good amount of questions which with the medium to high complexity, and I would like to try to answer all these questions today. Okay, so part one was already released, I think 2-3 weeks back, and this is the part two of the question set. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question is, your team receives numerous alerts from monitoring systems, leading to alert fatigue. How would you define the alerting tech strategy to ensure critical issues are prioritized? So, so first thing is, as a scrum master or as a TPM, what the first focus should be to create an environment where this is a joint approach between the ops, SRE, plus the development team, right? So the first objective is that. But in my experience, the few challenges which I've seen regarding to the alerting techniques or what common issues we face, I'm trying to answer that. So what we try and overdo is sometimes we just try and overdo a lot. So raise alert for every small thing, right? Now that is not also a good strategy because you'll be flooded with a lot of alerts and then you will not be able to filter out, right? So at what threshold the alert needs to be raised, that threshold should be smart and it should be discussed across all teams, like I mentioned. The next thing is alert suppression. So if it is some delicate alerts which can be skipped or it is being, it is an output of another alert being raised. So this kind of alert should be suppressed. So that is the next point, which is the alert suppression, right? The next is alert aggregation. So let's say suppose there's a critical issue and there are lot many impacts on various other mechanisms. So all the alerts, the single alert should be aggregated and sent as one alert, impacting and illustrating very clearly what all has been impacted. Because for each alert, if anybody who has worked on those, each alert takes time, right? There is an MTTR and MTTD involved. So first the detection happens, which is the mean time to detect, and then the resolution happens, which is mean time to resolve, right? So both the steps for each alert, it would be that much amount of time, right? So what we need to do is we need to aggregate the alerts accordingly. Now, very strategically, the next thing is refining alert strategy. So usually what happens in our organization is the AD team creates the error codes, right? And that prioritization, they decide whether it's a critical, it's a medium, or it's a low. Also in close collaboration with the SRE folks or the operations folks who actually based on their experience also share which actually should be medium, high, or critical. So and the next thing is the contextual alerts, right? So, like, what is the business impact? So, this is an alert, fine, but what is the business impact? So, what they ensured or asked us to, as the development team, to also add the business impact of those alerts, right? Not just this alert. Okay, alert is raised and we are looking at it, but at what pace this needs to be looked at, right? So business impact will really help us identify what all issues needs to be taken on priority. Now, dev and operations teams regular collaboration, like I mentioned, we also have an initiative going on across the year, which is in very close collaboration. We have a DS daily scrum for 15 minutes, just a kind of a stand up with operations, the SRE, and the development team to regularly review what error codes are there, what alertings are happening, which alerts are taking maximum amount of time. So in modernization space, usually, because people are learning and also everybody is learning. So when you're moving application from legacy to modern, usually happens that the alert itself is taking a lot of time. So how do we optimize that? This kind of an initiative or the collaboration meetings should happen across the year. Now, user feedback is basically the first line of defense who is actually analyzing those alerts. So they can give their constant feedback, like I mentioned. Okay. Prioritizing critical issues. So, okay, now everything you'll have done, and now you know that this is a critical issue and this needs to be solved. So, first thing which we need to very clearly know is the escalation policies and where to escalate. So, that hierarchy and that list should be very, very clear to the person who is actually checking the alerts. So the next thing is, as and when you start monitoring and start, so the training and the documentation. So let's say, suppose I mentioned that the error codes are being raised in application, right? So do we have a playbook where all the error codes are mentioned? What is the business impact? So those kind of documentation. And after every release, that training should happen to the first line of defense and the operations and the DevOps, everybody. So they know that this is what is coming and this is what needs to be raised as an alert or something, right? So this is about training and documentation. The next is automated responses. So if there is a low or medium alert, you can send a automated response that this is being checked and this is the SLA for it. So immediately you don't need to check that. So or what how much we can automate, that will also really really help, right? So this is one thing. The next is, as a scrum master or as a TPM, all these things we should be knowing so that we can ask the right questions in the retrospective, and also track those things in terms of what is the quantity of alert, like this release went, right? Are the alerts increasing for any functionality? So these kinds of questions or these kinds of tracking in the matrix and in the retrospectives, which we can always discuss and improve processes on. So that's about how the alerting strategy can be discussed and prioritized. Okay, so moving on, the next question is, how would you develop and use matrix to track the progress and success of releases? What specific matrix would you focus on? Okay, so as you can see on my PowerPoint presentation, there can be n number of matrix, right? I'll quickly cover a few of them. So like, let's say, suppose progress matrix. Okay, so as and when the epic or anything is in progress during the release, the burn down and the burn up charts, most of us already know about it. The amount of work is pending or the amount of work is done against time. The sprint velocity gives an idea of how much work can be completed in the upcoming based on the past completed story points, right? Epic and release burn down. So if you attach fixed versions against the issues or the um, bugs, defects, whatever you are taking as part of the releases, then in Jira there is a facility of creating that epic and the release burn down charts. So that really helps in terms of taking the progress of the work which is being done. Now, once the release is gone, what all you can use to ensure the quality matrix. So defect density, once the release went, in the next 60 days, how many defects were raised as part of this particular release, and which is mapped to the particular release. So what we used to do is, as part of the RCA, we used to mention the epic or the work which is actually adding to the defect count. If it is something old or legacy, it's fine, but this kind of analysis we started doing, which was really helpful. The next is defect leakage. How many defects were missed to be tested? Like, there were defects in production, fine, but is it because of the missed testing or automation which we could have done to have a better quality code? So that helps us automate. So there were few issues in production which, when we analyzed, we saw that only the high test cases were actually executed, since this was a minor release, but there were some test cases which were crucial and marked as low or medium. So based on this matrix, we actually pumped up the criticality of those defects and ensure that it is actually executed from next time onwards. So this kind of matrix also really helps. Now, automated test coverage. So if you are using Sonar or anything, any tool particularly, you know what is the test coverage being, how many uh, cases are being covered, how many scenarios are being covered, how many lines of code are being covered, and release scope changes. This next matrix, what I personally used to do was post the release. I used to check what was the estimate we had actually committed and what was the actual estimate, actually effort which was utilized. So based on story points only. But if it is a variance of more than 20%, then we used to call it out in the retros and we used to discuss it out, that what was the change. If it is too much of a scope change, so we are agile and scope changes but natural. But if it is something which is changing the entire epic itself for which the epic was written, then that needs to be discussed further with product and the relevant stakeholders, right? So what we can do, make things better so that we can release on time, because once it is committed, then the problem is that if there's too much of scope changes and the negotiations are not happening properly, then the release quality would get impacted. That is the biggest problem. Okay. So the next thing is team performance matrix, like when the story was started to when the story was finished. So what was the time taken for it? Okay. The lead time is like when was the story created? Like it might be the requirement came like 3 months back, but we took 3 months to start the story and another 2 months or 1 month to complete the story. So the lead time would be 4 months, whereas the cycle time would be 1 month. So that's the difference. Cumulative flow diagrams helps us to analyze, in what stage maximum amount of issues are there at a given point of time. So when we started with a new project, what was happening was we were following Kanban, but because we came to know more and more about it as when we progressed, and the teams were already engaged in some other priority work also, we kind of started with that with a Kanban model. But the things were started, but it was actually not finishing. So with this uh, matrix, we could actually show that there are 50% of the stories which is in progress, but only 10% has been completed, right? So this needs to be changed. So this really helps us in case of Kanban as well. Now, release success rate. How do we define release success rate? Is majorly if the defect density, the mentioned, it is less than the threshold, like less than 2 defects, less than 3 defects, 3 critical or 2 medium kind of a thing. So that helps us define the release success rate. Now, what is the cost of release? So how many story points were actually spent? Like I mentioned that we used to calculate the spent versus estimated. So it is more or less a cost of a release. So are the actually it is giving a benefit or not, we can get a cost, I mean get a feedback based on the CSAT. CSAT is basically a business value matrix which gives the customer satisfaction level, so how satisfied they are using our product. The next matrix is NPS, which is Net Promoter Score. So this is basically if I'm a user of an application, am I going to suggest this application to anybody else? So word of mouth. So 9 and 10 being highest, and that is you become the promoter of the application. So that is NPS. The next is feature usage. So feature usage is when, okay, fine, we have got the requirement and we delivered. But next, I mean, after 3 months or 4 months, how much features, how many users have actually used that feature? Is it something which we are, because everything adds a cost, and we know that in Agile we say minimalistic is the best thing what we can do. So because everything adds cost to it, maintenance, the issues, the bugs, explaining users, everything is a cost. So what features we are developing is actually useful or not. So that would help. The release frequency is again gives us a significance that how agile the team is, how quickly we can actually do the releases. The frequency is 3 months, 6 months, like then we actually need to work on our release process itself and making our teams more and more independent and agile so that we can do faster, quicker deliveries with quality. So there can be n number of matrices, right? But what is your primary focus? How would you define that? You would define that by discussing with your um, project manager, with your development teams, with your all stakeholders, right? The product and what exactly is crucial for ensuring that the project is on track and delivering value. So our release manager also used to release something called as scorecard. So scorecard, so that is the in scorecard she used to, if this epic is on track or not, she used to connect with all the scrum masters and get a detail on the epic, whether it was getting completed on time or not, there are any risk or not. So based on that, amber, red or green, the epic listing was actually shared with all the stakeholders, including the senior management, the product. So everybody is aware that the work which is being done, where does it stand, and are there any urgent issues where team needs help, right? So that is what is the most important thing, that we need to identify the key objective of what exactly makes value. The next thing is then once the value is derived, one of those metrics through three, four, whatever matrix you think would actually make sense, but overdoing of too much of matrix and scrutinizing team also brings a very bad impact. So we need to be very balanced here, which matrix are we choosing. Then we have to continuously update and make the information as transparent as possible to all stakeholders, releasing at a frequent interval, and then analyzing the trends, that what these matrices are telling and what action do we need to take, right? So let's say, suppose in the epic scorecard, if it is red, it is very very clear that this epic needs immediately our product owner, head of the product owner used to ping and say, what help do you need, can I jump in somewhere? So that is the impact of good matrix. Also another defect density matrix, when we did, we analyzed that all the defects which are pertaining to the stories were actually related to 8 pointers or more stories. So we started splitting the stories in good acceptance criteria, so that it is doable in a sprint, and it is also checked easily by all the team members and the POs. So that really helped us. So effective using matrix effectively clearly brings a lot of value. How best we can do is with the help of dashboards, keeping the data as accurate as possible, regular reviews with all the stakeholders, and then transparency, that metrics are transparent. So you can also use rich filters to show the epic status and all. It gives a percentage. There are a lot of options in the rich filters in the Jira dashboard. So these really helps us to be on track. And yeah, that's about matrix. Thanks. Okay, so the next question is, a containerized application is not scaling properly under load. How would you diagnose and resolve this issue using Kubernetes or another orchestration tool? So Kubernetes is an open source container orchestration platform used for automating the deployment, scaling, management of containerized applications. So there are a lot many advantages of it. So I would just like to give an example of what happened was, there was, during the peak seasons, our platforms were continuously coming down. So, or either there was a very big latency to give any response. So to figure that out, we did use the Kubernetes CPU utilization functionality, where we can actually see, we actually use the monitoring tools, where we saw that there was high CPU utilization during the peak seasons, which was actually not facilitating or helping the pods to get allocated. So so what we did was, we had a very organized and focused team. First we organized a very cross-functional task force, including the DevOps, the development team, the network engineers, to address the issue. Then we did had the coordinated diagnostic effort, gather all the data possible, and then we use Grafana for real-time insights into resource usage. So based on which we actually got to know that the CPU utilization was very, very high. Then the next thing, as a TPM or a Scrum Master, one should do is the stakeholder management very, very effectively. What is the impact? What is the business impact? How many users are impacted? What is the timeline to actually fix this out? So that kind of keeping everybody in loop, that was in parallel happening. Then there was a very safe environment needs to be created, where this root cause analysis can be done effectively without any blame games, right? So the the documentations of the findings and sending it across to all teams, understanding whose action is what and the responsibility of it. So that was very, very important. Uh, in your retros or in your meetings or this, where we can, promote the best practices, what all we can actually implement, or what kind of tools we can implement, what kind of um, best practices we can implement, which will actually have a good impact on our stability as well. So the risk management was another aspect which needs to be looked upon. Like next time onwards, if this kind of an issue comes, what is the plan B, right? So if we now know the entire Microsoft outage what we had just few weeks back, so I'm sure this all steps would have been also taken place, and also the risk map. What is the plan B? What not to be done next time? So that kind of things also needs to be circulated to all the team and folks, right? So this was one of the experiences what we had, and Grafana definitely helped us a lot. So Kubernetes definitely helps us deploy in the clusters and also manage it very, very effectively, the containerized applications. Okay, so the next question is, how would you leverage automation tools to enhance the efficiency and reliability of the release process? So aiming at 100% automation and using tools as much as possible is always recommended. Having said that, there can be org-based directives which the teams needs to adhere to, but it is always good to keep uh, doing the trials and errors, and also finding out the best practices in industry which can be suggested. So the first thing is identify the key area of automation where maximum amount of your time or redundant works are there, which we can actually have. In each cycle of your development, actually there is a tool which can help us and ease us and release us from the manual errors, right? They can help us relax. So the first thing is the automated building, the deployment, the testing. Everything can be like Jenkins we can use for that automatic building of the code. Then we can use GitHub CI for the automatic building. There are numerous amount of tools to, in your CI/CD pipelines only, you can integrate your unit test cases, which can actually tell you upfront without even deployment whether it's going to work or not. So this kind of things really help, these kind of tools. The next is infrastructure as code. You can use Terraform and AWS Cloud Formation are the most famous ones. But you're building your entire infrastructure with the help of the code is really helps in the terms of resiliency as well. The next is monitoring and alerting. So Grafana, we had just had an example of how that helped us to identify the the latency of the applications basically due to the CPU utilization. So these are the effective tools. Datadog. These are all effective tools to, post deployment in the code and the production. It helps us to monitor and also alert in case of issues. The next is security automation. So it is always suggested that we integrate the security related stuff as well in the CI/CD pipelines itself. So security is a shared responsibility across all. So Sync, SonarQube, all these things can be, all these tools can be really helpful to integrate in our CI/CD pipelines itself. The next is ChatOps. So let's say suppose there's a deployment going on, we can use our Slack channels or the Microsoft Teams where we integrate it, and the deployment steps and everything would keep coming us as an intimation in those chat ops, which is your Microsoft Teams or the Slacks or whatever. We are also, by the way, we are also trying to build an chatbot for easy collaboration and deployment as well in the and also the for the alerts, basically the self-healing. So these are all kind of tools which you can use. Automated documentation you can use for API documentation. You can use Swagger. So this, and there is one, I think, Docusaurus, which automatically documents the entire documentation step. For API documentation, you can use Swagger. So, so these are effective tools which we should be ideally implementing it all during our release process, which really helps us streamline and reduce the manual errors. Now, the most important thing is to bring this awareness in your teams, and also to have training sessions to continuously upgrade your teams, right? So once that, like, let's say suppose the code is committed, so developer pushes the code to the repository, so a CI/CD pipeline is triggered. Now the commit triggers the CI/CD pipeline, right? Then the automatic build happens, like Jenkins. We just give an example. Then automated testing, unit integration, and security test runs are run. Okay. Then if the test pass, then the application is deployed to some staging environment where the testing can happen. The monitoring can happen with an automated monitoring tools to track the application's performance. Then once the application is approved and the approval is achieved, we can go ahead with the production deployment, which again would be through a blue-green deployment strategy where there is hardly any downtime, right? So post deployment monitoring, continuous monitoring, we can use the tools like Datadog or Grafana or whatever. So this kind of tools at every stage definitely helps us bring a lot of reliability to our release process. Okay, so the next question is, there is a friction between the development and the operation teams regarding the deployment schedule. How would you facilitate better collaboration and communication between these teams? So this is a very, very common problem because each set of application or the teams have maybe some other priority, due to which they don't have the bandwidth to ensure that they will be able to deploy or they'll be able to support an application. So it is very important to facilitate a better collaboration and communication across all teams, and also align development and operation schedules to streamline release and enhance productivity. So what we started doing was, in the QBR itself, there was a common, QBR is quarterly backlog refinement, where there's a common priority set across all teams, like be it starting from development to so the UAT testing team, to the SRE team, to the operation teams, to everyone, that this is the priority and this is the order. So when I say priority and order together, it's because priority can be same for multiple things, but ordering, once you order it, it's in a sequential order: 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, right? So that really helps us to have a common understanding first of all. Even if that this happens, then we have to conduct one-on-one meeting with the stakeholders from both teams to understand what is the root cause of the friction, right? Then next is identify specific pain points and areas of misalignment. Why is it? So when we did this activity, actually we got to know that once the code was deployed into production, right, every time there was some or the other failure, and because it was not getting reviewed properly from the operation teams, it was actually going into the production and there was a lot of noise over it. So the operation team, so we brought in a lot of other like every time a change is created to deploy the code, there was a task in it which mentioned that this has to be approved and reviewed by the operation teams, only then this can be deployed. So this kind of joint facilitation helped us come to a conclusion where there was a common alignment, right? uh, then we should be using, for brainstorming, we should be using some proper structured activities, maybe some SWOT analysis or some fishbone diagrams, or develop, like, a joint roadmap of what exactly we are going to achieve. Like I mentioned in the QBR, we actually prepared the roadmap of how and when what activities will be achieved. So there was a clear role, there was a clear responsibility and type and timelines for the upcoming deployments. So this really helped us to streamline the entire process and get a common alignment across all the teams. But as a TPM or Scrum Master, the role is very, very important to keep everybody in loop, to monitor, to adjust your timelines, and regular check-ins of these kind of meetings would definitely help us get better feedback and evolving our project needs, right? We can definitely foster a good collaboration and communication across all the teams once we once all of this is in place. Okay, so the next question is, share an example of how you effectively communicated a release plan to diverse stakeholders with varying levels of technical knowledge. So yeah, as a Scrum Master or as a TPM, the main goal is to manage your stakeholders, correct, effectively. So usually when we are working in a release, so I've just put the list of all the stakeholders or all the people who are actually engaged when we are developing a uh, product. So the development and the developers and the QA teams are highly technical, detail oriented. They know what is going on. The operation teams are focused more on the deployment and the logistics, the system stability. Are the playbooks being updated? Are the alerts in place? Are the alert dashboards in place? And all those. Product managers are interested in the impact of new features on business goals. Correct. Is it going to generate more revenues? Is it going to bring us more client? The next is the customer support needs to understand changes so that they can actually assist the users. And if the issue comes, they have to troubleshoot, right? So the next is executives, of course, the sponsors of the application or the feature, looking for high level impact on what business metrics are we going to achieve. So the next is customer end users. They are the actually customers are king. They are going to use the application. They are going to use the new features. So if we see, there are wide range of technical skills, or there are wide range of people or area of interest as well, right? So what we do is we have a very structured way of development. In the QBR, which is around 3 months before, it's kind of a PI planning where the entire scope of the release gets defined, that this is the features which are going to be developed. And like I mentioned in my previous one, it is same across all the teams. So the SRE, the operations, the customer support, the TI team, everybody knows what is going to come in the next 3 months, right? Once the development is in progress only, they are engaged effectively, and they are given proper downloads in terms of, when I say they are engaged, it means the operation teams, they are engaged in terms of what exactly is being developed, what are the error codes which are being added, what is the feature all about. So before every release, it's mandatory to give them the entire download of all the stuff, and it is being reviewed by them. Without their review, it will not go ahead. So that is engaging them in an effective way, definitely is a must have. The product managers, like I mentioned, the epic scorecard, and always, of course, product managers are engaged with us in terms of weekly meeting as well. The product owners definitely, or the product managers, are definitely engaged more and more in terms of our daily check-ins, or our the meetings, the review calls, and all those stuff. But at high level also, the epic scorecard definitely helps them to identify which are the bottlenecks. Then there are customer support teams who, like I mentioned, all the features needs to be approved by them in terms of what is being delivered, not from the say of what is being developed, but what is being what is already developed, that they need to know for sure before deployment into the production. The executives are looking at the high level summary. So what do we do is we make a tailored communication material for all of them, right? So executive summary goes like once in a month kind of a thing, where if you can see, I've just given a small snapshot, not related to my project, of course, but it is going to increase the user retention. What exactly is this feature is going to bring, right? So in terms of functional language or the business impact language, it needs to be written. So the product managers also help us here. So if there is a performance improvement, let's say suppose it is going to reduce your load time by this percentage. So matrix numbers is really a must have in terms of executive summary. So bug fixes resolves a critical issue which was impacting, let's say, suppose 25K USD or something like that. So a number would definitely bring a lot of sense. Once all those communication and the development lifecycle and everything process is being solved, once it is also done, then we have to use multiple communication channels in terms of technical meetings, the all hands meetings. Senior leaders actually come and show us the products which are not even known to us, but we are not involved in it, but they come in the all hands and they show that this is what is being developed across somewhere in another team, but it is important, right, for us to know. So this brings a lot of visibility. uh, the executive briefing we have just mentioned about. as much as visual dashboards or something like that we can bring, it really helps us bring that synergy in all the stakeholders and the teams. The simple, being simple is one of the agile mantras as well, and simplified messaging does help a lot. So this helps us managing multiple diverse stakeholders with varying level of technical knowledge, and the SM and the DPMs have definitely a very important part to play here. Okay, so the next question is, your team needs to integrate security practices into DevOps pipeline. How as SM or PM would you approach implementing DevSecOps principles? Also, please share a real life example where this was actually solved. So what is DevSecOps? Is basically integrated your security checks as soon as possible in your CI/CD pipelines. So it's kind of DevOps plus security. So that's the DevSecOps. So giving a background about the project, actually when I joined the project it was already implemented, but I've heard about it that the project involved developing a web application for a financial services, right, which required stringent security measures due to sensitivity of financial data. So the steps which was taken was the culture and the training. So build a collaborative culture, right? Security is everyone's responsibility. That mindset needs to be imbibed. So though this requirement came before I joined, but we actually took a lot of steps to improvise and refine this, right? Because there was a separate risk team which was actually doing all these kind of stuff. So the developers were just, code it, and there's a risk team which will handle all this. But later on, we started with the shift left security, where uh, the integration in the CI/CD pipeline happened very early. So shift left testing, if you have heard that, as soon as you develop, you start testing also. Same thing with the security. So you start integrating security very early, automate security testing. So we implemented a lot of tools for vulnerability scanning, dependency check, container settings. So we have also mentioned these tools in your previous slides, where Jenkins, GitHub, CI, all these tools really helps us to integrate the security tools into our CI/CD. Now, the tools to consider is Sonar Cube. Now, in our organization, we have this Sonar Cube, where there are how many vulnerabilities are there, how many breaks are there, how many critical ones are there. So all these things are very clear and visible. So what we do is, before starting of the sprint, we go ahead and check those, and we define which all, and we store a capacity of for RT, that is the run the engine. So we take a particular amount of story points and definitely try and fix this as soon as possible. So now it has become like from one team, now it has become the entire responsibility of the entire development team. It's not just one team sitting and fixing things and others are breaking. So this really helped us bring a very positive culture, and definitely plan better, and ensure that the security is also considered as the topmost priority, which is definitely the case for any financial institute, or for that matter for anywhere. Also, we conducted training sessions for development and operation teams, focusing on common vulnerabilities. So OWASP top 10 was actually a training which was done every 1 year, I suppose, for all the developers and the development team, stakeholders, everyone, because everybody should be knowing the vulnerabilities. The next is establish a security champion program, where team members took on additional responsibility to advocate for security best practices within their teams, right? So this too also really helped us to bring a lot of synergy, and people getting motivated to uh, take this ownership as well. So yeah, I think that's about it. These were the steps which we had done, and it really helped us. Okay, so the next question, your system is experiencing latency issues that impact user experience. How would you identify and resolve these latency problems to improve performance? So the first thing is to gather the information and monitor the performance. Like what exactly is there a pattern? Is there a trend? What exactly is happening? So in our organization, during the peak season, every time the application used to, just stop behaving the way it is. So we started seeing the trend, and the so we identified that there was a time slot during which this usually happened, and it was also the duration during which the client was actually awake and was accessing the application. So based on further collecting the information, we understood that there were long running queries which were being executed on the database. At the same time, the application was was being used by some jobs, and also the system was being used by the app by the customer. So we analyzed those things, and we realized that the cron job set actually for that particular job was actually triggering some very high intensive reconciliation queries, which we actually then understood the root cause, and we changed the timing of it when it was night time for the customer. Then we actually started scheduling those uh, sessions. I mean the cron jobs. The also one another thing was we circulated this information to the entire development team. The long running and the high super utilization queries were actually taken, and the queries were shared with all the people, so that before actually implementing anything into uh, systems, they actually can do a self-check kind of a thing before this. So this kind of we actually optimized the slow database queries and added necessary indexes. This was another solution which was done, and then we scaled out the application servers by adding more instances and optimizing the load balancer configuration for distributed traffic and more evenly. So these kind of actions actually helped us reduce the latency by 50%, right? So this kind of incidents happens day in day out across all applications, I think, but the main idea is to identify the root cause, implement a solution, inspect the various monitor through which with the help of the various monitoring tools you can inspect and adapt and change the way things are written. So that's about how you can like if your system is experiencing latency issues, what exactly we can do about it. So if you have any other suggestions, comments, or feedbacks, please do put it in the comment box. We would definitely be happy to read it. So thank you so much. This was the last question. So bye bye.